Hey everybody, welcome back to our weekly podcast. My name is Patrick Tan. I'm the general counsel for Chain Argos. Of course, every week we have John and Ryder, our chief data scientist and CEO, joining us on the podcast. Thanks for tuning in. We have a small but loyal following, and we appreciate that. Um, what are we gonna talk about this week? We got to talk about Aave's 50 million swap. Is lost the right way to characterize this? The money's
Well, money's
gone.
somewhere. Built
It's not
somewhere.
lost. It's not lost as in as much as you can't have it anymore. So it's not lost in that we know where it is. You just don't have access to it. So it's not, lost. But anyway, then we're gonna go into another topic that is very close to my heart about the limitations of tracing and what some governments have actually said about it in a way that they didn't realize that they said. And that's why I'm a little bit confused about that one, but John will have all the details for us. And then we're gonna talk about the is this the Ethereum Foundation mandate?
Yeah,
I thought only
yeah.
emperors issue mandates. But anyway, we'll talk about their mandate. We have a little bit of bonus content, very, very quick one right at the end for you, with respect to legal liability. And what are the limitations of trying to evade that? So let's just go straight into this Aave $50 million swap loss. It was covered by CoinDesk. Links will be in the show notes. What is this really?
I
Especially
mean,
for those who don't do a lot of DeFi, so go easy on them.
so it's the way DeFi, automated market maker works is there's a bunch of
Hmm.
money locked up somewhere, and that money takes the other side of your trades. That's what
Okay.
liquidity is. It's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
somebody's money takes the trades, and somebody decided to sell $50 million of something into a pool that had very little in it. And the way these things work, the most you
yeah,
can ever get out is what's inside.
yeah.
So they ended up selling at a price pretty close to zero, and so lost basically all of the money.
Uh, how? Well, I
I
mean,
mean, if there's a
how is how you've explained, but like, how could they have
So
made
let's
such a
say
mistake?
there's a market maker that has, $1 million worth of two different tokens, right? So
Okay.
the price is one, it has $1 million worth of each, the million tokens
Mhm.
each.
Yeah,
And then you try to sell 50 million of one of those tokens into the pool. The most you can ever get out of the pool is a million of the other tokens. So
correct.
you're going to sell it, assuming the system allows you to put all the money in, which all these things are designed to trade if you
Allow.
ask them
Yeah,
to,
yeah.
right? You'll basically, yeah, you'll get something like 1/50 as your price.
So, so did they send it to the wrong pool? Is that what happened?
I mean, so the user interface gives you a warning that you're
Mm.
going to get a terrible fill, and the person said, or the whatever the thing said, okay. Who knows if that was? I mean, obviously the money didn't vanish; it went to somebody else. So you could
Mm-hmm.
use this as a way about laundering money, obfuscating. Like there's lots of stuff that could be going on. Who knows what's really going on? So, was it a mistake or not? Who knows? Right? That. Uh, you know.
This is a
Uh,
good. This is a good one for.
Aave chose to refund some of the fees that they took, which is a small fraction of the loss, but whatever.
They refunded the whole amount or like a portion of the
Well, no,
fees?
fees. They can
No,
only
no,
refund
I know, but
fees. So
did they refund
I
all of their
think they
fees?
refunded all their fees, which amount to something like a percent. So, it's
Because I
not,
was at a sushi place yesterday and they got the order wrong and then they refunded for the whole platter even though it was completely wrong. So that I thought that was okay.
yeah, but lunch does not cost on the order of the total holdings of the sushi
Generally,
place.
yeah,
All
generally
right.
it does it.
The issue is they couldn't, I mean, maybe they could use all their money, but like it's large.
No, well,
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, I mean, they had the warnings, you know.
Well,
They
yeah, I mean, one response here is the front end should obviously warn if there's an issue. What should
Yeah.
the warning threshold be? Who knows? But if the price is going to move by 90, it's like, okay, everybody's going to agree a warning. You should be able to disable the warning. You should be able to trade anyway.
So,
Next.
yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Um, one of the things I was curious about because and you brought it up about money laundering because let's say now for instance the guy sends in say 50 million and he effectively gets taken because he ends up with this worthless token if you like and then or overpaid for something and then
Yeah.
the other 50 million goes out the other door. Now if we were then to say that, well technically that's, I mean, it's a trade, you lost. I mean, people do this all the time in casinos.
I mean, you lost. So what's going to happen here is that some MEV type thing, some automated trading process is going to arm the pool with the crazy price against all the other pools, and that thing will, or those things will collectively make all of the money. So
Yeah.
Yeah, this happens. Look, if you go into a stock market and you enter a large market order, it has price impact. And the entire point of that existing is that sometimes the price comes back and sometimes the price doesn't come back. I mean, I remember this Morgan Stanley, New York, more than 25 years ago. And I think it was one of the summer analysts was saying, I don't understand why you have to cover all these trades. The price is going to come back eventually anyway. Who really cares? And an older sales guy who sat behind me laughing, is like, I mean, yeah, usually the price comes back, but sometimes it just goes off in another direction for 30 years. And you
Yeah.
could see the look on this person's face. Oh yeah, I understand now.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
You know,
but
right. It's a currency crisis and the currency in some country goes to zero. People are selling it at
which can
crazy
happen.
prices and it just
Yeah.
keeps going and
Yeah.
disappears. Right. That
It
happens.
doesn't.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
No bonds default, price goes to whatever, some low number. Yeah, that happens. Yeah,
I
so
mean,
you should not allow this because it's conceivable. In this case, this is not what happened, but somebody
yeah.
could come in and say, I know this thing's about to get rug pulled. I know the price about to go to zero. I want to get out as much as I can. I don't care if I take a 70% haircut.
Mm. And then,
How do you tell that from a mistake?
yeah, you can.
I mean, you
Or
have to
like
get inside the person's head, right? You just can't.
well, which is tricky. Also, beyond that being just a straight up mistake, how do you tell that from laundering?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. How do you know if the person doing the trade is affiliated with some of the bots that made the money on the army?
That's I am not that this should be a recipe or cookbook, but in terms of modalities, I think that one is going to be tough.
Yeah, I mean,
Especially if you can show that look, it's just a bunch of arbitration bots who just arbitrage bots who
arbitrage bots, not arbitration
not
bots.
arbitration bots. Sorry, I'm too part of the goes
Yeah.
with the character, but arbitrage bots, and then they go in and then they do their thing. Technically, that's interesting. We'll file that one away in terms of special
I mean,
services.
if you want to have stuff that's not reversible, then what is your plan? I mean, there's a famous mis trade mistake issue, Japan stocks 20 whatever years ago, where somebody sold 600,000 shares for 1 yen instead of one share for 600,000 yen. I know this person, right? It's a famous case in the newspaper. The trades were canceled. You have to admit it was a mistake, and
Yeah,
the trades have to be reversible.
yeah,
And here, the tone of the industry is that people generally don't ever admit it's a mistake. They blame some other thing. And anyway, the trades aren't reversible, so it wouldn't matter.
yep. So on that note, speaking about money laundering, let's shift gears a little bit and talk
Hmm.
about tracing. Now we talk about tracing a lot in this show. I have been on podcasts where I have been extremely vocal about the limitations, perhaps unfairly so at sometimes, but I maintain my right to have an extreme opinion at times about these things because I'm concerned. I'm genuinely concerned. I would rather we not we do this correctly than to unfairly and incorrectly implicate the wrong people. So let's tell me a little bit about this tracing. What has the United Kingdom government said?
Okay, so I guess there's two components to this. So we'll do the UK thing first, and there's an example very recently of a still active, possibly mistaken, possibly not showing the problems
Oh,
case,
okay. Of course,
right?
this
So there's
XBT
there's two
thing.
related
Yeah,
things here. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's a bunch of yeah. I think he's yeah, we'll come to that. So the UK has it's a collection of guidelines around changes. It's actually about political financing in general. Right? And they have stated in here that they believe the UK should ban the use of cryptocurrency for political financing because, and I'm just going to quote, this is the official government report. The
Please.
review found that it can be difficult to identify the true ownership of cryptocurrency, increasing the risk of bad actors making foreign or secret donations into our politics. There is a longer description of the exact problem and some of who they consulted with, these kinds of issues. So that is acknowledging that this is an area where you probably have adversaries that have an incentive to hide their identity.
Mm-hmm.
So you should be assuming, a well-equipped adversary, not
Mm-hmm.
just some muppet that's not trying very hard. Because as we've discussed before, most of the people who get caught via tracing didn't do a very sophisticated job of hiding what they were doing. Uh, and and that they think it's very challenging to reliably unwind that competent obfuscation, which I think is consistent with the positions we've taken You
repeatedly.
know, we both agree, and I think have consistently said in all venues where we've been asked about this, that these tools do not work against people who know what they're doing and know how the
Yes,
tools work and are trying to avoid them. The questions of how well they work in other contexts is much, much more complicated.
yes.
And, if you're the British government, you're concerned about governments that don't like the British government financing policy, so yeah, this is clearly state level, whatever. And, everybody knows those people know what they're doing. So, generically it's the Russians, right? Something like that. And, they could probably hide pretty well. So yeah, they're saying they do not believe that the current stuff they have available to them is up to the challenge. And my read of the more detailed, longer description is they're open to the idea that it may not be up to the challenge in general, right? Um,
We'll put
the screening, the
yeah, we'll
screening
put it.
procedures in banks are at least,
Yeah.
they're not perfect. Obviously, this happens; people get arrested, but they think they're much better. No one's trying to get 100% perfect here. They're just saying we're nowhere near even thinking about how good this is, and they're saying we give up. It's too hard. Ban it. We don't know how to.
And that's quite frankly one of the more honest approaches to this that I've seen
Yeah,
of late,
yeah,
because
yeah.
I've always struggled with the especially the blockchain intelligence industry, such as it's called, or blockchain tracing, yada yada, crypto tracing, asset tracing, people who go like, I mean, and this just tells you at least Westminster has kind of noticed that, you can't on the one hand say that this stuff is completely traceable and transparent. We can figure out who done it. We can figure out everything. And then on the other hand, also say we have no idea who could do this. Anybody
Yeah,
who's sophisticated enough
yeah,
could definitely defeat all the
yeah.
controls. It can't be both.
I mean, it's certainly fair that if you're thinking about political donations, you'd expect the general level of skill and obfuscation to be
Yeah.
higher than, people in a restricted currency country trying to make sports wagers or something, right? There's a different levels of sophistication. So it could be the case that something works more reasonably in one case than another, but you need to evaluate that. You need to be honest about that, right? And sports wagers are smaller size than wholesale payments, and there's a whole continuum of things here.
And I think that's important when we come back to when we come back to and you said this repeatedly. Um, it's one thing to use these blockchain analysis tools to find leads, which I think is perfectly great. This is useful for finding leads, and then you have to kind of bolster that up with stuff on the side. But to use to convert that lead generation, if you like, it's like, when you do sales, just because you have 1,000 leads doesn't mean you have 1,000 sales. And if the sales guy was to come to you and go like, you should promote me and give me a bonus because I got a bunch of leads, how many sales did you actually get?
I would add that not every clever idea for leads actually generates useful leads. So you
Correct.
shouldn't really rely on every scheme.
Yeah.
Your tolerance for error by error, I guess, by leads, that means leads that don't close, right? Your
Yeah.
tolerance for error there is pretty
It's
high.
high. Yeah.
You don't expect everything but you also don't expect something that gives you a huge number of targets, effectively none of which are the right. If a lead system just gives you everyone within 50 kilometers of your office with their industry code registered with the government in an industry that you're selling to, that's useless, right?
Yeah.
So you have to, it's useful for leads in theory, and you have to, explain why your thing might work. And, okay.
I thought it's interesting. We'll put the
Yeah.
links in the show notes.
Well,
It,
that
it's
connects directly to this live example.
yeah.
So there was USDC seized from a 16,
Yeah.
15, 16, something like that, addresses in
Yeah.
a single thing that are definitely not related to a common sort of service, because many of them are registered to completely different businesses and they're
Yeah.
overly associated with them. Now, is it conceivable that some court case tells us that, the government knows those are all the same owners? Whatever, sure, maybe,
Maybe.
who knows? Subsequently, a couple of those have been unfrozen. There's some court case. This relates to some fraud, whatever allegations. What you're seeing here, some of the Zach XP team and other crypto people said they think it's totally irresponsible of Circle to freeze these random service addresses that are, you know it's not clear exactly what's going on, but law enforcement is supposed to has freezes that are temporary and freezes that are longer, and sometimes you freeze while you figure out what's going on to avoid the assets disappearing. And so I think some of this is a little bit extreme. Many of these people have the view that their own personal approach is sort of absolutely infallible in some sense, and that the court should only ever do that, and anybody that does something different is just dumb. And sometimes the answer is the money's somewhere in this area. We don't really know exactly where. We'd like to freeze it while we speak to these people. And if you freeze all the money of a business, they're more likely to answer your phone calls if they're offshore, whether you think that's morally right or wrong, whatever. But that's a standard thing that happens in the world,
Yeah.
So it's a little bit messy. I'm not, we're certainly not defending indefinite arbitrary freezes with no. But if you're looking at a situation and there's a bunch of stuff that may or may not be somewhat related, freezing all of it, calling the people and trying to figure out what's going on is the way that this works. I mean, there's scenes in every movie with the, don't let the plane take off like that. We got to talk to the guy, whatever. That's the thing. Um, Now, whether some of this stuff got unfrozen because it was a mistake, whether the tracing was errant, whether, who knows, right? But it's relatively
Mhm.
complex. It also shows that Circle's policy of requiring a court order doesn't
It's squishy.
fix anything and isn't even strictly better, right? Because sometimes you can get a court order for temporary freeze and then they also let money escape because they're difficult about their. So, these are just hard problems. The legal system has
Also, I think
procedures that are not perfect for managing these things.
Also, I think that there's two types of freezes. There's the casual freeze where there's before a court order, like a seizure warrant or an affidavit, and then there's
But
the
Circle
more
doesn't do that,
serious.
right? Circle doesn't really do that.
Not to my knowledge, not to my knowledge.
Yeah,
But
they kind of claim, but yeah, it's hard to tell because they
I
also
don't.
claim they don't do commingled funds. Who knows?
I think a lot of the claims are hard to parse. So I don't know. I do know that
I
Tether
mean,
at
banks
least.
do this stuff, right?
Yeah,
Banks will
yeah, yeah.
freeze
They
accounts and then
momentarily
sort out what's
phase.
going on, and then
Yeah.
that happens, right?
So
I mean,
like
everybody's had a suspicion of fraud, account
yeah, of
frozen,
course.
use the app, like that's yeah.
Like um you know Tether, for instance, I know for a fact also does casual freezing, and
They definitely do casual freezes.
I
They're open
love this
about that,
term
yeah.
casual freezing. It's like
Yeah.
oh yeah, we didn't have anything to do this afternoon, so we just froze your shit.
Well, I mean,
you
that's
know
sort of like expedient exigent circumstances, whatever. This is a thing legal systems recognize to some extent. Being really, really a hard ass about that is also not great because telling the police, please, you have to go get a warrant. Like, but the guy is driving away right now. Can eh, it's
that's
hard.
more of like a question about in terms of balances for legal systems, and I think that debate, as we can see, is still ongoing and raging, not just in this particular area, but in many other areas as well. Um,
I mean, some of that relates to a paper that should go out, which I think just went out. The first preprint is being submitted about procedures for escaping tracing and the inevitability of escaping tracing if you're competent connects to the earlier discussion.
Correct.
So yeah, yeah, it's hard. I mean,
Yeah.
I think a lot of these industry people should maybe be open to the fact that their own personal opinion of how stuff is supposed to work isn't how anything in the real world works in basically any area. The legal system is about finding outcomes that are kind of okay overall for everyone and generally aren't exactly what anyone would have wanted.
Yeah, it's always gonna have some kind of but this is not the legal podcast, so let's talk about the the Ethereum Foundation mandate.
Yeah, so the Ethereum Foundation, so they made some statements we talked about a bit about a month and a half
Yeah.
ago about, L2 scaling being dead and how they were just gonna go back to scaling their own system, some other changes. Fine. So they issued a relatively detailed thing, again, about now, it's about a week and a half ago, I think, describing you made a reference to, imperial arrangements. It's what they view their mandate as being, right? The thing that they're supposed to be doing. So it's kind of a weird foundation in that, in some sense, they're financing research and they got a whole bunch of money from some historical thing and they just have that bunch of money and they just finance the research they think they're supposed to do, but they're not really governed beyond that because they're going out to donors and asking for money to do projects going forward. They disperse grants of all kinds of sizes. So this is a statement of what they think they're doing. Um, yeah, so that seems to have had some interesting responses. In fact, I listened to one podcast where people talked about how this stuff works, and they kind of described the L2's situation as, these people went out and built these products, and they've been completely decimated now by, I guess, the product's not working and the foundation um, ghosting them and moving on to something else. Right? It's a research foundation. right? So their focus is on building a decentralized, censorship-resistant system, and they don't really care about individual project success. Um, I mean, in some sense, they're not supposed to care about individual project success. If you're a foundation that's research, you should care about
Technically.
if the research results work, and it's called research because you don't know if it'll work. I mean, a lot of the comments we've made on the L2 scaling thing over the years have been, I don't think this thing works, or I do think this thing works, or these are the issues with this thing, or whatever. You're going out and trying to build a system and seeing if the compromises you have to make in that system are economically viable. And if it functions, and, you know, have a good time. Um, it's not research if you know it'll work. And the Ethereum
Mm,
fund,
yeah.
a thing that's got foundation in the name, that's doing some vaguely developmental whatever, shouldn't be involved. You should just go raise money, run a business. If, you know, Arbitrum, whatever, is unhappy that they raised a whole bunch of money and their product doesn't work, that's not the Ethereum Foundation's fault. And the
True.
fact that the Ethereum Foundation wants to focus on areas that don't have several years of proven failures, despite the amount of money they've raised, I credit the Ethereum Foundation with stopping digging, right? I mean, they're
Mm,
not supposed to be boosters for projects that they financed. That's not, I mean, there are certainly plenty of venture type investors who view themselves as supporters of their portfolio companies, even after the point where it becomes clear their portfolio companies don't function.
yeah.
We've seen this, right?
Yeah,
And
of course.
oftentimes this leads to resorting to fraud. And these are well known stories. Not
Yeah.
all the time, but, more than never.
There's a high incidence.
That certainly happens, right? People
Yeah.
that don't shut the business down when they just make some shit up. Um, yeah, that's not really supposed to happen. And credit to these people for saying, no, no, these are the principles, and we're going to stick to these principles, and we're going to move on to a different area because the last thing we did didn't really work.
Yeah.
I'm
I
not sure the next
appreciate,
thing's going to work. Who knows? It's research, right?
but yeah, I appreciate the
But people
honesty,
railing against that's very funny. Very funny.
which is strange. Okay, so speaking about foundations and liability, let's talk about that's the bonus content.
Uh, Nicely done.
Balancer Labs is shutting down, but
Yeah.
Balancer's not. It's just Balancer Labs.
Yeah. So Balancer suffered a large, almost completely debilitating hack. It's still kicking, but in a smaller state. November of last year. So what's that? 5 months ago. Um, and they've decided, and Um, I'll read a quote here from the announcement that this would be happening. Balancer Labs, as a corporate entity, has become a liability. And then the reasons are straightforward. The exploit created real and ongoing legal exposure. Maintaining a corporate entity that carries the liability of past security incidents is not responsible stewardship. So I guess you're a lawyer. If you
Allegedly.
have legal liability, does shutting down one of the companies related to that legal liability make it go away?
No, that is
Okay.
exactly what has happened in the Manus AI situation as well. That's
Oh,
an analogous to this as well.
well, that one's complicated because,
It's a little bit complicated, but the concepts are similar. There are strong parallels to that. You can't you can't set up
oh
a
yeah, I guess they
company.
transferred the IP and then they shut the
Yeah.
company down. Yeah, okay, fair
Yeah,
enough. It's
that's
just sense. Yeah, I
literally
agree.
what
It's
they
sim,
did.
sim.
That's
Yeah, it's
literally what they
sim.
did.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then
You're okay.
and
Yeah,
then
you're right. Yeah,
like you're trying to basically screw you're trying to circumvent capital controls, that's for one.
yeah, yeah.
Um if you go read up about the Manus AI stuff, like and that's
Mm.
kind of an example of that happening in real life, and sort of demonstrating to you what the consequences are, by thinking, and quite frankly, it's a little bit naive
Yeah.
and childish to think that just because the company doesn't exist anymore, the liability dies at the company. I think that's taking the assumption that corporate personality is a thing to its logical extreme, and that's really not how this stuff works.
But even
Um,
in that case, right, the estates of dead people can still
oh
pay
yeah,
out, and the
yeah.
Epstein's estate's still paying all kinds of people, to pick a random example.
Yeah,
Um,
uh beyond that, you have this situation where okay, you've shut the company down and you think that that's gone away. Now your
yeah,
issues are dual fold because let's say now you shut the company down and you've dissipated the assets of the company, whatever assets that there were in the company. So you think that you're, liability proof. But that's when, and because you shut it down, you've actually made it worse. Because you shut it down, now you don't have a shield anymore.
Yeah.
You basically shut down your shield generators. And as everybody remembers, when the shield generators went down, the Death Star was exposed. And because the Death Star was exposed, it made it easy for the Rebel Alliance to take down the Death Star. So you don't have a corporate
I,
shield anymore. You don't have a
I
corporate
mean
shield
that
anymore.
that
And
analogy aside,
even when you do have a corporate shield, as you will recall, it has that corporate shield can be pierced. That veil of incorporation can be pierced in the event that there was that there was an intention and an actual defrauding of say the government, for instance, by not paying taxes, by using that
yeah.
corporation to do that. They'll pierce that shield in in a jiffy.
Well, I'm going to give you some bonus content and read the first line of the post I quoted earlier, and then you can tell me if any shield exists at all following this statement.
And it
This
says,
is, I'm quoting it. I'm
yeah,
quoting it.
go ahead.
I'm writing this because I believe you all deserve full transparency from me on where I stand, what I've decided regarding Balancer Labs, and why I still believe in the people building this protocol. So that person actually has no shield ever for anything because they completely control the entity as a facade. Yeah.
Not only that, they've accepted personal responsibility and
Yeah.
liability on a
Yeah.
level that
Yeah.
perhaps you
Yeah.
should speak to your attorney before you make such statements.
Before you make a public statement that you're doing something for liability shedding reasons and that you're doing it unilaterally and it's your personal view. Yeah, that's just totally crazy. I can't believe anybody, you know.
Like, if you kept it up and shut your mouth, maybe you might still get away with it. Maybe. I don't know. This is not legal advice. But
Or
then
you
you
issue a
didn't.
corporate speak press release about how you're restructuring
Yeah,
for,
something, something. But speak
yeah.
to some lawyers before you start moving shit around. And definitely shutting down and running away and hoping that everything goes away quietly is not a solution.
If you might have limited liability through a company, don't issue statements in the first person about how you're taking control of that thing.
Yeah. You should always speak in the third person so nobody knows what you're talking about.
Well, yeah, a variety of things, but like referring to the company as I
I
is a
believe
way
it
for the
was
government to pierce
Sir
the
John Law who
liability.
said, l'économie, c'est moi, So
Yeah.
I am the French economy,
I think
So
if he said that, he'd have been beheaded. But
yeah. Anyway, on that note, thank you for tuning in. Thanks for all the likes and subscribes, and we appreciate it. We know the YouTube algorithm doesn't get this stuff out to most people, but if you found it interesting, don't forget to share it. Until next week, thank you. Bye bye.